Hey everyone. Remember that story last week about that dating app, the one that got hacked?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Turns out they weren't exactly Fort Knox when it came to our data.
Yeah. It's like they say, nothing is truly private anymore.
Right.
Right.
Well, not so fast. It's true, data breaches are, becoming scarily common. But that article you sent over, the one about the new privacy laws, it's like
Yeah.
a beacon of hope in this sea of digital uncertainty.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. We're talking about actual laws that, force companies to treat our data with a little more respect.
Exactly.
Tell me more.
Exactly. You've probably heard of CCPA,
Uh-huh.
the California Consumer Privacy Act,
Yeah.
and maybe even GDPR.
GDPR, yeah.
The European Union's version.
Vaguely familiar, yeah. Well, they're not just bureaucratic headaches, right?
Mm.
These regulations are pushing for, a fundamental shift in how businesses handle your information. And what's fascinating is it goes beyond just companies trying to dodge fines.
Really? So it's not just about companies trying to cover their behinds.
Not at all. The article emphasizes that it's about rebuilding something we've lost in this digital age, right? And that is consumer trust. It's like imagine you could only shop at stores with solid reputations.
Okay.
Those known for treating customers right. That's what these laws are trying to do for our data.
Interesting. So instead of just taking our data for granted, companies might actually have to earn our business with strong privacy practices.
That's the idea. Strong privacy practices could be a major competitive advantage, like a seal of approval saying, hey, we take your data seriously.
Makes sense. But how does this actually translate into the real world, the
Yeah.
real world of cybersecurity? The article mentioned some pretty specific changes happening because of these laws.
Absolutely. One of the big ones is encryption.
Right.
We've all heard the term, but think of it like this. Every time you check your bank balance on your phone,
Okay.
encryption is working behind the scenes to make sure no one can snoop on your financial info. That's the level of protection we're talking about, and it's becoming mandatory in many cases.
So it's less about locking our data away and more about making it unreadable to anyone without the key.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And then there's data minimization. This one's pretty straightforward. It's all about companies collecting less of our information in the first place.
Okay, so less data collected means less risk if they're asked a breach. Makes sense. But how do they decide what's really necessary?
That's the million-dollar question. And the article dives into how companies are grappling with this. The idea is to keep only what's absolutely essential for their business. Think of it like this. You wouldn't give your address to every website you visit, right?
Definitely not. Only the ones I actually want to send me junk mail.
Precisely. Now, companies are being forced to think the same way about your data.
That's a relief, honestly. But what about all the companies these businesses share our data with, like for processing payments or whatever?
Oh, that's where things get even trickier.
Okay.
The article calls this third-party risk.
Okay.
Imagine a company with, top-notch security, like a digital fortress around your data. But then they share your information with a vendor who's, let's just say, a little less careful.
Oh, not good.
Not good.
So even if I'm being careful, the companies I interact with need to be just as careful with who they work with.
You got it. And that's a major shift these new regulations are driving. Companies now have to be way more careful about who they're sharing data with and make sure those partners are just as committed to security. It's no longer enough to just trust that everyone's doing the right thing.
It's like a chain reaction of responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare for these companies.
You could say that. In fact, the article highlighted some of the challenges businesses are facing trying to keep up with all this.
So if these new regulations are like a digital obstacle course for companies, what are the biggest hurdles they're facing?
Well, imagine trying to teach an old dog new tricks. Many companies are stuck with outdated systems that weren't built with this level of data security in mind, So upgrading everything.
Yeah.
Expensive and complex. It's kind of like trying to turn a bicycle into a rocket ship.
Okay, so not as simple as just hitting the update button. This is some serious digital renovation we're talking about.
You got it. And that leads to another major challenge, right? Finding the right people to do the job. The article talked about the shortage of experts in both privacy law and cybersecurity.
Oh, wow.
It's like trying to find someone who speaks fluent Mandarin and Klingon.
Yeah.
Rare and in high demand.
Wow. Talk about a niche skill set. But even if you find those people, all these changes must cost a fortune.
Exactly. It's a huge financial burden, especially for smaller companies. It's like the article said, implementing these regulations can feel like trying to run a marathon with a sprained ankle.
Oof.
It's possible,
Yeah.
but it takes a lot of effort and resources.
So it sounds like a real dilemma. Companies need to do this to build trust, but it's a massive investment. But hold on. The article did mention some potential upsides to all this, didn't it? Like maybe some unexpected benefits to come out of these
Yes,
challenges.
absolutely. It's not all doom and gloom. And one of the most interesting points the article made was how these regulations could actually lead to better products and services for us, the consumers.
Now that's what I like to hear.
Yeah.
How does that work? I would have thought stricter rules would stifle innovation, not encourage it.
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But think about it. When companies have to be super careful about the data they collect and how they use it, they can't just hoard everything. They're forced to be more strategic, focusing on the data that truly matters.
So instead of drowning in data, they're being forced to swim.
Exactly. And that's where the innovation comes in. This new focus forces companies to come up with creative solutions. The article called it baking privacy in from the ground up, right?
Okay.
Designing products and services with data protection at their core, not just as an afterthought.
Okay, so these laws might actually be the push we need to see some really cool privacy-focused tech come out.
Yeah.
Like, are there any examples of this happening already?
Absolutely. There are some seriously smart people working on this right now. The article mentioned federated learning, which, it's a mouthful. But essentially, it allows your phone, for example, to help train an AI model without your data ever leaving your device. So
Wow.
your data stays private, but still contributes to improving things like voice recognition or language translation.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's like having your cake and eating it too, benefiting from AI advancements without giving up our privacy.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out a bit. This has been super interesting, but for the average person who isn't a tech whiz, what's the key takeaway here?
It boils down to this. These privacy laws, while complicated, are ultimately about putting you back in control. You get to decide what information you share, who you share it with, and how it's used. It's about transparency and accountability.
So no more blindly agreeing to those 20-page terms and conditions just to use a website.
Hopefully not. The CCPA, for example, gives you the right to know what a company has collected about you, the right to have it deleted, and the right to say no to your data being sold.
It's about time. It feels like we've been in the dark for so long when it comes to our data.
Absolutely. But these regulations are shining a light on those practices and giving us, the users, more power. And it's not just limited to a single law or country. The article hinted at some pretty big trends on the horizon.
So what kind of trends are we talking about here? What's on the horizon for data privacy?
Well, one that really caught my eye was this idea of a global approach to privacy regulations.
Okay.
Right now, it's a bit of a patchwork.
Yeah.
With different rules in different places.
Yeah, that sounds like a headache for companies trying to navigate all that.
Exactly. And it can make it tough for consumers, too.
Yeah.
Trying to keep track of who's doing what with their data. So the idea of global harmonization, even if it's a long way off, is pretty fascinating.
So one set of rules for everyone. That would be a game changer.
Yeah.
The article also mentioned AI needing its own rule book. That sounds kind of like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It might sound futuristic, but it's a real conversation happening right now.
All right.
Think about it. AI learns from the data we feed it, right?
Right. So what's the issue?
Well, imagine an AI system used to, evaluate job applicants.
Okay.
But the data it learned from was unintentionally biased against certain groups.
Yeah.
It could end up making unfair decisions.
Yeah.
Even if that wasn't the intention of the people who built it.
So it's not about robots taking over. It's about making sure the AI we create reflects our values, not our biases. That's a lot of responsibility.
Exactly. And that's why having clear guidelines for AI and data privacy is so crucial. It's about ensuring these powerful technologies are used ethically and responsibly.
Wow. It's like a lot to think about. So to sum it all up, it seems like we're at the start of a major shift in how we view and manage data privacy.
Absolutely. It's a complex landscape, but these new regulations, as challenging as they might be for companies to implement, are pushing us toward a more trustworthy and secure digital world.
And most importantly, it sounds like we have more control now than ever before.
Exactly. You get to decide who you trust with your data and use your choices to support companies that prioritize your privacy.
That's a powerful message. So to leave our listeners with something to ponder, if you had one piece of advice on how to navigate this evolving world of data privacy, what would it be?
Be curious.
Okay.
Ask questions. Don't be afraid to dig a little deeper and find out how companies are handling your information. And remember,
There.
your data is valuable. Treat it that way.
Love it. A little digital self-advocacy goes a long way. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.